Hi, I'm Rosie Edwards and I'm a long distance athlete from Great Britain. I moved out to Boulder 2 years ago to train for the marathon, and I've specialised in everything from the 10k right through to the marathon. So I've been here for the last 2 years and I work full time while training. So today I'm going to be going through some of my favourite recovery tools, some of the myofascial release techniques and some of the mobility that I use on a daily basis. It'll take me 20 minutes to go through the whole routine. I'll be focusing just on that one side of the body today, but usually I'll do both. So, alrighty, so normally I'll start with my feet and then work up the body. I'm going to begin with the lacrosse ball. I alternate between this and the R3. So first of all, I'll just do a little bit of lateral movement, left to right through the plantar fascia, curling the toes, digging into the arch of my foot to alleviate any kind of tension that I might be holding there from speed workouts or some of the longer runs. And so after I've done 10 of those, I'll go to the R3 and I just do forward and backwards through the arch of my foot. So just roll in, adding as much pressure as I can through here. This is one of those torturous ones that feels really good, but hurts at the same time, like going to the dentist. But yeah, this one is one of my favourite ones, just for getting rid of any of those knots that are through the bottom of my foot. But then I'll go to the calf. The thing I like about the R3 is that you've got the two different dents, so this one fits really well into the Achilles, so I'll roll directly on the Achilles. I injured it last year, well, both of them. I had partial tears in both, so I have to pay a lot of attention to my calf, gastrocnemius, and keeping my foot mobility at a good level to make sure that I don't get too much tightness and doesn't cause any more problems through that area. And what I like to do is use the edge of the R3. We're all a little bit torturous as marathon runners, but I like to use the edge just to dig into the muscle. So I'll find a trigger point for my myofascial release and I'll just press directly onto that spot. Once it starts to release, it almost feels like an inflated balloon and then the air going out of it, so then the tension decreases, and then I'll just move down to a lower portion of the calf until I feel like I've got all the knots out of there. For me, my problem area is usually my hips, so my sacroiliac joint sometimes becomes posteriorly rotated, so for me I have to do a lot of work to release through the hips and also improve mobility through there. So for this one, first of all I focus on the TFL. This can be a really tricky one to find, so I imagine I've got like a pair of jeans on and use the edge of the pocket, and I find trigger point. So for me it's usually right around here. I apply the tool and then I just press into it, so we get really, and then I roll onto my side a little bit until you'll know when you're on this one because your body screams at you, but you stay on top of it. It's very manageable on a day-to-day basis. Each of these I'll do for at least a minute. So I start with the TFL, and then I'll move laterally around the body to the glute medius and then to the glute max, just so I can allow the muscles to work in pairs and release one at a time so they're not fighting one another. So once I've gone through the TFL, I'll just go onto my side into the glutes, so more onto the posterior part of the body, and you can use like just the edge of these. If it's too intense for certain days for me, I'll go more onto the belly of the R3 right in the middle, but must be feeling brave today. I'm right on the edge, so digging into the left side. And then I go into the glute medius, so like right into the belly of the glute. This one always feels really good. And then as long as you don't feel any kind of like sharp pain or kind of nervy feelings, you're okay with this one. And then I move into the peanut. The peanut sits either side of the spine, and for this one I will just roll from the bottom of the sacrum, and I'll go all the way up. I go all the way up, crawl in to get to the top, the thoracic spine, and then all the way back. So you can, and then if I find a really tight spot, I'll lay directly on it, place my hands behind my head, and just do almost like a partial crunch, opening with the scapula, and then just going in and out of that movement. That's the rolling and the myofascial release part of my recovery. So like I say, I would do it both sides of the body, usually a little bit longer on each spot. So minute, if I've got a really tight area, I can hold it up to 2 minutes on there. So just to get things nice and loose before the mobility piece. So now I start with some triple hip openers. So like I was talking about with the left side of my hip, I really have to work on keeping the QL loose and staying nice and mobile through the hips. So I start in a kneeling lunge. This one I actually like to double the mat over, so I have a little bit more padding under the knee, not too much pressure on that patella, so just kneeling here. And then to get some lower back mobility as well, you can get 3 for 1 on this one. It's like a good little cheat. So ankle mobility, opening the hip flexors, and then lower back work. So I'll just forward lunge kneeling while hyperextending through the lower back. Probably the only position I'd do that in, because we do a lot of hyperextending anyway, but do 8 of these, and making sure that they're really slow rather than forcing the movement and jolting the lower back. So working through the movement but making sure that you're not forcing it. So this one for me really opens up through the hip complex. And then I take the right foot out on an angle, so the toes facing on a diagonal, and now we're going to target like the short adductor muscle here. With running, because everything's in that sagittal plane going forward, unless you're falling off the track, I like to look at the transverse, so we're looking upper and lower body separately. So here I'll rotate my hands to the left but point my knee out to the right. So rotate and then back to center. And then for me here, I get a really good stretch through that short adductor muscle, and I get a little bit of movement through my ankle here, so it helps to keep my Achilles nice and loose, and then also thoracic spine. So lots of good rotations going on here, and allowing me to loosen up all through that kinetic chain there, the posterior chain there, sorry. And then I stay within the same knee, place the foot out to the side, and stretch my hands out. Again, this is getting into the lower back too, and I just hinge back and forward, and do 8 here as well. And then I do the opposite side, and then from here I go into low lunge with T-spine rotations. So I work full time, and most of the time I'm on my feet, which is good, but there is quite a lot of sitting that's involved, so I do get pretty tight through the hip flexors. So I pay a lot of attention to just keeping those really nice and loose. So this is one of my favorites, and also for upper back, especially if you're at the computer and you're rounding through your shoulders, the low lunge with rotation. So I'd do 8 on each side, bringing the foot in line with the little finger, and then making sure that my hips don't swing out. So this is one of my favorites, the low lunge. And when I've done 8 on each side, I'll take the same hand as the foot and then open up as wide as I can, and then thread the needle through the hand. And this one works upper back, but then it also allows me to stretch through the adductor a little bit more. And then there's just 2 other ones. Normally, I'd use a wall for this one. Not a ton around here, but we'll pretend there's a wall. So for this one, if there's, imagine the wall is next to the hip with the leg that's elevated, and then you hold the same hand out, and then you would skim the glue up against the wall and then back down. So I would do 10 to 12 of these. This helps to activate my glute, but then also release through the lower back. And then the last one I do, one of my old clients showed me this one and I was amazed at how much of a stretch I felt. I always found piriformis a really hard one to get into. So this is a yoga pose, supposedly. So what you do is you lie on your back and if nothing else, give this one a go because it feels so good. Holding onto the little toe, cross one leg over the other, and then you're just pulling the feet apart. So this is one of my favorites because it gets so deep into the piriformis and it just feels like such a good release, and it's going to stretch the side that's on top. So if you have one side that's a lot tighter than the other, you'll know as soon as you try it because it gets pretty intense quickly. But so definitely not how it'd look if a yogi did it. Their feet would be on the ground, but for a runner it's probably about the amount of mobility you need. So that's my mobility routine, a few stretches there. So yeah, have fun. All right.